hope.
Welcome back to Teaching Technology. Today's tutorial is on blockchain basics. Let us begin. What is a blockchain? A blockchain is a distributed ledger or a type of database that is shared, replicated, and synchronized among members of a decentralized network. It can also be within a central entity, but it's still within a decentralized network in which all of the parties in the network all have transparency among each other. Some of the benefits of blockchain. Computational power. Although this applies more to Bitcoin and proof of work chains, you still have increased computational power with a blockchain. Security. Whether it's a permissioned or permissionless blockchain, you have a network that is more secure because there's more transparency and people are more connected. Consensus. Again, no matter what the chain is, a major benefit of blockchain is consensus. Whether it's the consensus algorithm, proof of work, proof of stake, or just the proof of stake chain that happens on Hyperledger, which is permissioned. Savings. You're saving time and you're saving money by having that transparency within the blockchain. You're getting real-time data, you have flexibility, and finally, there's increased speed of execution. What is a business blockchain network? It's a distributed ledger encapsulating an entire business ecosystem. Think supply chain, governing transactions and encapsulated in smart contract. Consensus was just a fancy way of saying that you have code that binds that consensus or those rules that are being executed, rather than third party for transaction validation. Types of blockchains. You're permissioned, you're permissionless. Permissioned blockchains are things like Hyperledger, where you have a more centralized private network. Then you have permissionless, which is things like cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano. They're more permissionless. The major benefit of permissionless blockchains is that you're having a trustless system versus permissioned where you need to have trust. Bitcoin is the biggest of those permissionless systems. It has a proof of work consensus algorithm, which means that the way in which transactions are being validated is via mining and computational power, which is the fancy way of saying that the more nodes or people on the network, the stronger the security becomes, versus Hyperledger, which is a privatized blockchain. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's by Hardhat. It is coded primarily in Golang versus Bitcoin that's coded in C++. Hyperledger is permissioned, which means that the people on the blockchain need permission from other parties. And finally, I think the consensus algorithm, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, is a proof of stake. 5 elements of blockchains. Number 1, transparency. When you have everyone in an ecosystem, whether it be supply chain, whether it be just with a financial system, you have all of the dealings transparent. It makes it harder for there to be bad actors and malintent. Immutability. This is just a fancy way of saying that it does not change. Each block cannot be changed. That's the biggest thing, especially if you want to code blockchain, is that you have to be very, very, very smart with your smart contract, because once that smart contract is secured and deployed, it cannot be changed. Security. You have more security because you have a computer system, not only in the cloud and using IoT, and a myriad of other new age technologies are working together globally to have a more secure network. When you think about something like a permissionless chain like Bitcoin, the reason why there hasn't been any hacks is because of computational power. The more people on the network, the stronger it becomes, because you're creating a stronger security system with that node being on chain. More nodes, stronger the system becomes. Number 4, consensus. Two really great examples of consensus are proof of work and proof of stake. I'll get there in a second. Smart contracts is the final one. A smart contract is essentially a way that you can record data on chain. Some great examples are in the permissionless world would be the creating of tokens to create a more decentralized financial ecosystem, creating NFTs, which I'm pretty sure you're familiar with, as well as DeFi, so doing any kind of financial transaction with a metric. There's also smart contracts in Bitcoin, believe it or not. Bitcoin does have a scripting language as well as the creation of nodes. And you can make sure that there is smart contract rules set in place in which there is more security when it comes to dealings with patrons on the Bitcoin blockchain, as well as node creation. You can create Lightning Node in Rustlang, as well as Golang. Finally, there is permissionless smart contracts, and the structure of that is in Solidity with Ethereum and other proof of work chains like Ethereum, whether it be Cardano or Polkadot. The quick structure of a smart contract is there is the, just to keep it very, very simple, you have the Pragma Solidity version of the smart contract. Then you essentially have the smart contract that has a set of functions within the contract. The way to deploy it is you first need to deploy the contract or compile the contract. The second step is to migrate the contract. There's several ways of doing that. The truffle way is by creating a migrations file with JavaScript, and the MPX hard hat way is a little bit more complicated, but I don't want to confuse you. Finally, there's testing of the smart contract. Because the smart contract is immutable, it's best practice to do some kind of testing for the smart contract to make sure that the contract does everything that it says. Permission chains. One thing that permission chains store would be cash, because they're really just using the USD or a national currency. Records, anything from healthcare data to any kind of security data at all, and then just data in general are all stored on chain. The ledger logs transactions and actions. Governance and provenance. You have this, security and a set of rules that guide an entire supply chain or business ecosystem. The consensus is via a centralized rule system. And finally, there's smart contracts, which are just rules for the network. In Hyperledger, smart contracts are called chain code. Permissionless. The assets are more granular. You have information. You have monetary currency where, like I said before, you have cryptocurrency, which banks 1.7 trillion people that are unbanked, where now you have a more decentralized on-chain financial system. The ledger, like I just mentioned, is decentralized, where it can track an entire ecosystem. It can store time and transactions. The consensus is trustless via proof of work, which I mentioned earlier, and it's with mining, and it solves a complicated math problem, or proof of stake, which is where validating nodes on chain vote with what happens and are paid in transaction fees for their work. Finally, smart contracts. These are actions on chain, whether it be token creation, stamping some kind of data for time, NFTs, DAOs, etc. Proof of work. It is a consensus mechanism in which the miner must solve a complicated problem in order to mine a block. The proof of work coins are Bitcoin and Litecoin are two examples. I think Dogecoin is another. It relies on computational power rather than a staking of nodes for security. Proof of stake. It's a consensus mechanism for transaction processing and block creation via validating nodes, which are just token buyers or those that have a large amount of tokens, receiving transaction fees for staking tokens. DeFi. As you know, blockchain is way bigger than just DeFi. DeFi is really just what has gotten a large amount of people interested in blockchain. Blockchain is really security, data management, and a way in which people can have decentralization. It's mainly, or it stands for decentralized finance, so obviously it is going to be tied to permissionless blockchains, which are very novel, with Bitcoin being the biggest to stem from it. But Bitcoin necessarily isn't correlated towards DeFi, but it is definitely a product that is stemmed from Bitcoin. When you think about DeFi, DeFi is more correlated to Ethereum, where you have things like money makers, automated market makers. You have obviously trading with the myriad of swaps, Uniswap being the most prominent. You have the creation of tokens. You have DAOs, which are decentralized autonomous organizations. It's which you can make decisions on a pot of money, or any kind of foundational decision, uh, with a rule set on blockchain versus, um, you know, where the current system is, where people get funds and the funds don't go to the right place. And then obviously you have NFTs, which are familiar these days, but could get bigger to things like representing voting, representing people on chain, being a representation of assets like real estate, etc. And, really what it is now is that blockchain is merging with finance, banking the 1.7 billion unbanked people around the world for free with programmable money. So obviously DeFi definitely has laid its mark and is definitely going to elevate the crypto space even further. To end, Bitcoin and DeFi are not blockchain. Blockchain is an umbrella term that encapsulates Bitcoin and crypto. There is security management, there is asset management, there is the efficiency of supply chains, and so much more that stems from blockchains. You have a great night.